When Kotoha got back to the boarding house, there was a guy she didn't know standing inside. She stopped at the entrance, eyes wide, staring at him. He looked back at her and smiled. An honor student gal who prides herself on independence. A naturally charming college guy. A sudden start to cohabitation. There was a man she didn't know. He asked her who she was. Then, easy as anything, he told her he was looking forward to living with her starting today. Two classmates spotted Kotoha walking down the hall and nudged each other. One pointed out that she was Nikamiya-san from Class 1, noting how much she stood out. Kotoha Nikamiya, 16 years old. She kept to herself and walked past without reacting. High school for her had been surprisingly peaceful. Given how she looked, it was supposed to stay that way. But then someone slammed both fists on her desk and yelled a name at her. Sachio. Kotoha didn't know any Sachio. Her classmate didn't either. Kotoha looked up, confused. The person yelling turned out to be her classmate, explaining that Sachio was the landlady of Kotoha's boarding house. A 67-year-old woman who lived a solid 30-minute walk from the nearest station, up steep hills with no easy access. Kotoha had already thought the place was in the middle of nowhere. Sachio had taken offense to that. Apparently Sachio had hurt her back. She'd been planning to go swimming at the gym that day, slipped, and fell. The doctor said it'd take 3 months to fully heal. Kotoha was confused and asked what that had to do with anything. Her classmate asked if she meant Itsuki-kun. Kotoha demanded to know who that was. In a smaller panel nearby, Sachio dramatically described the whole ordeal. The gym visit, the slip, the fall, while Itsuki crouched nearby at the house entrance, doing something without any particular expression. Sachio explained. The guy was her nephew's son, a fourth-year college student currently on a leave of absence. She'd felt bad leaving Kotoha alone while she recovered, so she'd asked him to fill in as the substitute landlord. Kotoha's reaction was immediate and clear. She didn't want to suddenly live with some stranger, just the two of them, no less. Sachio shrugged it off. There wasn't much she could do. The boarding house location was so inconvenient that no one else was willing to move in. Then, completely unbothered, she added that she'd already warned him. If he laid a hand on Kotoha, she'd crush his balls. She laughed. Kotoha started to protest, but Sachio cut the call before she could finish. The screen showed the call had ended at 3 minutes and 42 seconds. Itsuki, who had apparently been standing nearby the whole time, noted simply that it was pretty much as Sachio-san had said. Sachio, in a small cutaway, gave a cheerful thumbs up and wished them good luck. Itsuki smiled at Kotoha and told her he was looking forward to the next 3 months. Kotoha stared back at him, flat-faced, completely unenthused. Kotoha told her classmate the whole thing was sketchy. Way too sketchy. Her classmate thought it sounded amazing. A clean room, good meals, an older guy around. She told Kotoha to just let him spoil her. Living with an older guy sounded great. Kotoha refused flatly. She pointed out that no normal landlord just does all that without reason. Her classmate wasn't convinced and kept pushing, saying Kotoha should just go ahead and let him make her his girlfriend. Kotoha shut that down immediately. Her classmate kept going, gushing about how guys who can do housework are dangerously attractive, and that the other day Itsuki had apparently brought out a whole afternoon tea set just because he felt like it. Asking Kotoha if she wanted some tea like she was royalty. Kotoha's other classmate cut in, flat and dry, pointing out that a college guy who goes out of his way to get close to a high school girl is just creepy. That was enough for Kotoha. Close enough. Then her classmate glanced toward the window and mentioned, almost offhand, that someone had been standing outside the school gate for a while now. The girls looked out. Someone was leaning against the fence near the school gate. One guessed he might be a parent. The other said he was way too young for that. Maybe someone's older brother. Kotoha squinted and looked closer. Then the guy outside glanced up and their eyes met. He looked directly at her. Kotoha's expression went blank. Her classmate leaned in, teasing, asking if that was maybe someone's boyfriend. Then she turned to Kotoha directly and called her name. Kotoha had already gone stiff. She stood near the window, eyes wide. One of the other students in the classroom looked over and repeated her name, confused. Kotoha stormed out to the gate and demanded to know why he had come to her school. Itsuki explained, without much urgency, that he'd forgotten to give her lunch that morning and had brought it. He held it out, but since he didn't have her contact info, he wasn't sure how else to get it to her. He was still thinking through that part. Kotoha stared at him. She wasn't sure if this guy was for real. She wasn't sure he was capable of being anything other than exactly like this. A teacher appeared, Kamada from student guidance. He'd heard there was someone suspicious hanging around outside and came to check. He spotted Kotoha and called her name. Kotoha's stomach dropped. It was Kamada-sensei, who regularly got on her case about her piercings. Kamada asked Itsuki if he was Nikamiya's guardian. Itsuki said no, he was her landlord. He added, calmly, that he'd just come to bring Kotoha her lunch. Kamada repeated the word. Landlord. Kamada told Kotoha directly. He didn't care whether the guy was her landlord or whatever else. If he was done here, he should leave. Then he turned his attention to her, noting her piercings and her hair, and asked when she was going to fix all that. Kotoha said nothing. Itsuki stood a short distance behind her, watching. Kamada kept going. He said he didn't care about diversity or whatever. The way she walked around looking like that was a problem for the school's reputation. Kids just needed to do what adults told them. Kotoha stood there and took it. She'd heard this before. It never changed. She was used to it, but that didn't make it less exhausting. She thought, not for the first time, about why adults were always like this. They just pushed their own standards onto everyone around them and called it common sense. The teacher's voice was still going. He snapped at her. Was she even listening? Kotoha blinked. Her eyes had gone hollow. Itsuki stepped in beside her, calm and easy. He said, simply, that he didn't like a world where you couldn't say you liked what you genuinely liked. Kotoha turned to look at him, startled. He kept going, still relaxed, still smiling just slightly. He pointed out that kids could carry something a teacher said offhand for the rest of their lives, so it was worth watching what you said. The teacher sputtered, thrown off completely. Students nearby who'd caught the tail end of it agreed, muttering that Kamada-sensei was really stubborn. The teacher rounded on them, shouting at everyone to get back to class. They scattered. The ones who stuck around to watch got chased off too. Kotoha thought, quietly, that this was bad. Itsuki reached over and rested his hand on top of her head. She didn't move. Neither did he for a moment. Kotoha stared ahead, eyes hollow. In her memory, she was small, sitting at a table, asking her mom for a new school bag. The kind that sparkled. The kind she actually liked. Her mom asked why she wanted a new one. Kotoha said she thought it was sparkly and cute. Her mom asked if someone had made fun of her for it. Kotoha swallowed. Her mom pulled her close, bag and all, and told her firmly, other people are other people and they're them. She didn't have to change the things she loved for anyone. Kotoha's eye, close up, was still. Maybe this new landlord wasn't the kind of bad adult she'd assumed he was. She let out a long breath as she arrived back at the boarding house. Eyes closed, shoulders dropping. She'd decided on the way home. She'd thank him properly for the lunch and for today. Her heart was going a little faster than she expected. She turned the door handle and stepped inside. Itsuki was asleep on the couch. She walked past him quietly. On the table nearby, a chef certification textbook was sitting open. She noticed it and paused. That explained why he cooked so well. He was working toward something. She also noticed he had his own stuff going on. Even with all of this, she stood there a moment watching him sleep. He'd been making meals for her, dealing with everything today. He looked completely out. Then his eye snapped open. He jolted awake, startled. Kotoha flinched back hard, nearly toppling off her feet. He blinked, sat up, and asked when he'd fallen asleep. Itsuki noticed her and said she was back. He said, "Welcome home." Kotoha straightened up, steadied herself. She needed to say thank you. That was the whole point. She called him landlord and started to get the words out, bracing herself a little, and then stopped. She had to do this properly. Itsuki leaned in toward her slightly. She tensed completely and demanded to know what he was doing. He told her to take it off. Her expression went flat and dangerous. The internal reaction was instant and sharp. She erupted at him, calling him suspicious, calling him names, demanding to know what the hell he was thinking. Itsuki, calm as ever, explained that there had been a bug on her shoulder and if she'd moved it would have gone down her back, that he'd already flicked it away. Kotoha went rigid. She screamed at him to say that first. Outside on the balcony, the ladybug sat quietly, rattled. Kotoha was embarrassed and furious at herself. She'd completely misread the situation. Ugh. Itsuki glanced at the clock, noted it was already late, and headed toward the kitchen to start dinner. Kotoha stood there a moment, then remembered. He'd been about to ask her something before all of that. She was pretty sure that whole mess was still his fault for how he'd phrased it. But fine. She pointed at him and told him to do his job as a proper landlord. Then she added, a little louder than intended, that if he tried anything weird she'd end him. She tripped over the edge of the rug. Itsuki watched her go down with a blank face. He caught her. His hand landed on her arm before she hit the floor. She looked up at him from close range, wide-eyed and flushed that he told her it was okay. He'd handle it. He looked down at her, easy and certain, and said that as for Kotoha-chan, he'd make sure she was absolutely happy. Kotoha stared up at him, completely red, eyes wide and stunned. She scrambled upright and yelled that it was the way he said it, not what he said. Itsuki tilted his head, genuinely confused. This was the story of a gal and a landlord's far from peaceful everyday life. Itsuki had breakfast ready at the table. Kotoha shuffled in, half asleep, and muttered a greeting. He said good morning back. This was her new everyday life. Kotoha took a bite and lit up a little. The food was good. Itsuki remarked that she was up early. She told him it was for makeup. He asked from across the room what she was doing up at 6, and whether it really took that long. He genuinely couldn't picture it. Kotoha said she had a reason to wear it, even if it took time. She used to be made fun of for how she looked. Too heavy, wrong eye shape. She'd liked cute things anyway. That was the problem, apparently. Being the kind of person you were while liking the things you liked was enough to get mocked for it. So she started dieting, studied makeup on her own, changed herself, and somewhere along the way she got closer to the version of herself she'd been picturing all along. She started liking who she was. To her, makeup was the strongest armor she had. She grinned at that thought. She showed Itsuki the glitter she'd just bought, pointing out how the pink tint made it extra cute. He leaned in close to look. She was mid-explanation when he said, simply, that she was right. Kotoha jumped back hard, startled. She yelled that he'd scared her. Itsuki asked if she was okay. She said she was fine, but she was clearly rattled. She thought about it afterward, a little annoyed. He had no sense of personal space, and he didn't even seem to realize it. That was the part that kept catching her off guard. She was still a little irritated by the time she got to school. Her classmates spotted her makeup and called it amazing. Kotoha's mood shifted. She'd also crushed the midterms. High marks across the board, and she wasn't shy about it. She knew good grades didn't change the school rules. Kamada from student guidance was still going to be Kamada. But she'd take the win. Her classmate noted that Kotoha really went all in, multiple part-time jobs, studying on top of it. She asked what Kotoha had actually been doing in the hall just now. Kotoha admitted she'd spotted Kamada coming and struck a smug pose on purpose. Her classmate laughed. Then she added, more quietly, that Kotoha had been looking pretty scary lately from sleep deprivation, 3 days straight, and was kind of intimidating people. Kotoha said she wasn't trying to. But it couldn't be helped. She had to survive. After all, she'd stick to her style on her pride. Her classmates stared at her with something between admiration and mild concern. Kotoha's phone buzzed nearby. The alarm she'd already snoozed once. She woke up flat on her back, blinking at the ceiling. She checked the time, sat up. It was 7:31. The time she usually left the house, that she'd never been late once in her life. A knock at her door. Itsuki's voice, breakfast was ready. Kotoha stared at the screen. If she started makeup now, she'd never make it. Her pride was on the line. She cracked the door open just enough, told him she'd overslept and didn't need breakfast, and shut it again. She slumped. What was she gonna do about makeup? Itsuki's voice again from outside. Did she want to just skip first period? Kotoha's head snapped up. She opened the door wider. He said it was probably fine. One tardy wasn't gonna hurt anything. Some days were just like that. She stared at him. He looked completely unbothered. She thought about it. Maybe she really was just too stubborn. What really got to her wasn't when someone else came at her. It was when she messed up herself or let someone down. Some days were just like that. A dandelion nearby was cheerful about the whole thing. The stubborn rock next to it was not. Kotoha said, unprompted, that Itsuki was kind of weird. He turned around, completely thrown. He had no idea where that came from, but it made her feel at ease. She told him she'd eat breakfast after all. He said she couldn't go into battle on an empty stomach. She thanked him and said she would. She did her makeup on the way, or finished it up just outside. A gal's morning was hectic, but without it, the day couldn't begin. She noticed her makeup had turned out better than usual and figured it probably had something to do with her mindset. She came back inside and declared she was looking super cute today. Itsuki asked if she was ready. She said totally. Then, still facing away from her, he said yeah. She was. Kotoha went red. Wide-eyed, heat rising in her face. She stood there completely thrown. A guy had called her cute. First time. She yelled at him to shut up, grabbed her bag, and bolted out the door. Itsuki looked after her, confused, and asked if she was going to school. A straightforward compliment is unbeatable. Kotoha had been sitting with something on her mind for a while. She finally said it out loud at breakfast. On the table, flowers and a meal that was, again, way too elaborate. She wanted to know what she was. Some kind of noble? A celebrity? He told her it was because he wanted her to stay healthy. She fired back that if this was what it took just to be healthy, then the whole world was unhealthy. He went quiet. She pressed further and asked if he was spending her rent money on all this. He didn't answer right away. He said it was good practice for his cooking. Win-win, wasn't it? Kotoha called him a fool. She hated owing people things, especially when money was involved. He looked genuinely startled. She ate her meal anyway, thanked him properly when she was done, and then announced that since she had no part-time job that day, she was free. She spun around and declared she was going to teach him how to shop properly. He had no idea what was happening. She took him to the cheapest supermarket in the area, different from where he usually went. He admitted the prices were actually low. She guided him through it efficiently, pointing out where things were and which days had the best sales. He picked up a pack of high-end beef, eyes lit up, and suggested sukiyaki for dinner. Kotoha told him to put it back. He offered to pay for it himself. She said no again, they weren't getting meat that expensive. He shrugged and put it back, muttering to himself. Kotoha asked if he was actually rich. He said he wasn't sure. A lot of people in his family were doctors, so he'd never really tracked his own money carefully. A doctor? Kotoha blinked. She asked if that meant Sachio too. Itsuki said she was a bit of an exception. Sachio hadn't gotten along with the family expectations and had a falling out with her grandfather and the others. That was just like her, he added. He also mentioned he wasn't great at staying home either. So when Sachio offered him the temporary landlord arrangement, it actually worked out for him too. He started listing off nutrients out loud while they walked the aisles. Fish, meat, minerals, like he was reading from a chart. Kotoha gave him a look and asked if this was really the kind of thing people talked about at the supermarket. They checked out. On the way out, Kotoha rattled off tips. If he waited a minute longer, the discount would have kicked in. Bulk buying made more sense for certain things. Itsuki conceded that shopping had more depth than he'd thought. Walking back, Kotoha pointed out that the boarding house used to feel like just her space. But now it was where Itsuki came home to too, so he'd better get used to it. She spotted the deli she liked and pulled him over. Inside, the owner recognized her immediately and greeted her warmly. The owner took one look at Itsuki and asked if he was Kotoha's boyfriend. He was clearly not expecting that. Kotoha's eye twitched. He just stood there. The owner declared he was very good-looking. He laughed quietly. Kotoha set the record straight. He was the temporary landlord. Sachio was in the hospital with a bad back. The owner laughed hard at that and said it served Sachio right for acting tough at her age. In a small aside, Sachio, currently refusing her medicine, sneezed. The owner asked if Kotoha wanted to do the usual. Kotoha said of course. The game. Rock, paper, scissors. If Kotoha won, she got an extra croquette free. If she lost, she had to buy 2 more. She was currently on a 7-win streak. They played. The owner switched her throw at the last second and declared it today's special move. Kotoha lost. She groaned. 7 wins and then this. The owner told her with a grin that she'd let her win just this once, for her boyfriend's sake. Itsuki stood to the side, visibly confused about why no one was correcting that. Kotoha muttered that he wasn't her boyfriend. They left. The owner called after them to pass her regards along to that old hag. Kotoha said she would. Itsuki smiled. On the way back, he said the owner was pretty funny. Kotoha agreed and said those two had always seemed close, even if neither of them would admit it. Kotoha had already started eating her croquette straight from the bag. Itsuki asked if she was eating it right now. She pointed out it tasted better warm. He admitted he'd never done that before. Bought something and eaten it on the walk home. She stared at him. She asked if he had any friends. She immediately acknowledged that was kind of a rude thing to say. She pushed the croquette at him anyway and told him to just try it. He took a bite. He said it was good. She lit up and declared it the best croquette in the world. He agreed and added that croquettes with rice and sauce at home were good too. Kotoha leaned back as they walked and said croquettes on the way home were kinda nice. Right? Itsuki said yeah, it is. Back at the gate, she spun around and told him one more thing. He didn't need to do every chore perfectly, and he definitely didn't need to spoil her. That place was his home too. He shouldn't waste energy trying to be overly considerate. She added quickly that she had everything handled on her own, so that part was fine. He leaned toward her, easy smile in place, and asked, so he didn't need to spoil her anymore, right? Kotoha froze. She asked what he meant by that, voice coming out a little shaky. Itsuki smiled warmly without answering. That night at dinner, sukiyaki. Not the expensive cut. He'd used the affordable one from the same store that he told her no being picky, and that she was eating her vegetables too. Kotoha sat at the table, collapsed forward, a dark cloud forming above her head. This is the power of adult-level composure. Kotoha was at her convenience store job. Her manager apologized for the sudden call-in. She said it was no problem. She wanted to earn money anyway. Her stare, sharp as usual, was enough to make a nearby coworker flinch. The mindset, take every available shift. Her coworker, a college student named Tsuruyama, guessed their usual no-show had bailed again. The manager confirmed it, sighing. Tsuruyama was a flake, late or just absent. Today's excuse was that aliens had stopped him to ask for directions to a space center. Nobody knew where that place even was. The manager wondered whether to fire him. He was a good kid deep down, apparently. Kotoha thought about messaging Itsuki to let him know she'd be home late. She opened her contacts. He wasn't there. She didn't have his number at all. She turned it over in her head. She could sprint home and tell him, but she couldn't leave the shift. There was probably a landline at the boarding house, but she couldn't remember the number. She thought, with some irritation, that this was exactly what contact info was for. She stood still for a moment, then let it go. The manager called her over. Tsuruyama reappeared from somewhere, starving. The postage had gone up again, which meant restamping old envelopes. Messy work. A customer came in to send a package. The copy machine ran out of paper. Everyone scrambled. Kotoha sent the last customer off and exhaled. She was exhausted. By the time things settled down, it was already 8 p.m. She and her coworker stood in the quiet of the store like wrung-out dishcloths. She wondered if Itsuki was worried. He'd probably figured it out on his own. She thought, he seemed like that kind of person. A crash from outside made her jump. Lightning followed by a blackout. Her coworker panicked about ghosts. Kotoha pointed out it was just a power cut, and that this kind of thing happened a lot lately. She thought about the good luck charm hanging in the back room and asked about it. It was for business. She muttered that ghosts wouldn't show up in a place this new anyway. In the dark, a figure stood silhouetted at the window. Her coworker screamed. Kotoha gripped a mop and told them to wait. The lights clicked back on. It was Itsuki, completely soaked, standing at the entrance. Kotoha demanded to know why he was there. He was drenched head to toe. She asked what he was doing out in this. He said he'd gotten word she'd been called in suddenly. She still didn't follow. He said, "Don't tell me you walked here in the rain." He asked if she was the one who'd been out looking for him. He said he was worried something might have happened on her way back. He said he was glad nothing did. Kotoha told him he was worrying way too much. She pointed out that working part-time had given her plenty of stamina. If anything happened, she'd just outrun it. Itsuki took her wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop her. She asked what he thought he was doing. He looked at her straight and said, of course he was going to worry about her. Kotoha stood still. She asked, quietly, why? Her coworker, appearing from nearby, offered Itsuki a towel. He declined. The rain had let up, so he'd head home and get cleaned up. He added low that he appreciated the thought. They walked back together. Kotoha turned it over. They'd barely known each other. They weren't family. She was just someone renting a room. He'd run around in the rain looking for her. And been genuinely worried. He asked if she had her phone on her. And said he should have asked way earlier. He apologized. He told her, if anything's wrong, contact him right away. He held out his phone to exchange numbers. Stuff like that, Kotoha thought. Stuff like that gets to her. She stood there, face red, phone pressed against her face, making a sound that didn't quite form into words, and a small cutaway. Itsuki sneezed. Caught a cold the next day. A growing thank you in her heart. The landlord stumbled in the hallway, mask on, clearly running a fever. Kotoha caught sight of him mid-chore and couldn't believe what she was seeing. The guy had a 38.4 degrees Celsius temperature and was still trying to be useful. She got right in his face about it. He just grunted and insisted it was nothing serious. Kotoha marched him toward his room at the end of the guy's floor. He pouted and waved her off, but she wasn't having it. Sick people needed to be in bed. Full stop. She noticed he actually looked fine on the outside, which made it worse somehow. Then it hit her. This was probably because of what happened the day before. She hadn't told him she'd picked up an extra shift, and he'd been left waiting. That part was on her, and she knew it. She told him to stay put while she went to grab cold medicine. As she stepped out, she admitted to herself she felt a little bad about the whole thing. He grabbed the doorframe and refused to go back inside. Kotoha stared at him like he was being a complete child. He said he wasn't going to sleep. She grabbed his hand to drag him back. He slipped free and kept resisting. She reminded him it was Saturday. No school, no reason to be up, and that someone who'd nearly collapsed had no business fighting her on this. They struggled at the door, neither giving in. Then she lost her footing and fell. Kotoha caught him just before he went down, hands gripping his arms. He looked at her. Close, quiet, barely upright. She asked low if he was okay. He had nothing left. He collapsed right into her, dead weight, and she yelped on impact. She noted, slightly frantic, that he was actually lighter than expected. They hit the floor together with a thud. She got him to bed after that. Kotoha caught her breath, already exhausted. She'd carried him, given him medicine, and now he was finally horizontal. She called it good enough for now. She asked if he was hungry. He admitted quietly that he kind of was. She told him to stay put and slammed the door on her way to the kitchen. The door slam echoed down the hall. He lay back down, listening to her stomp off. He thought, a little blankly, that she was really fired up about this. He stared at the ceiling. Just the ceiling. He was bad at doing nothing, genuinely bad at it. That was the whole problem. The clock read 10:28. The world kept moving outside. He was just lying there, stuck. Restlessness sat in his chest, and underneath it, loneliness. There was rustling. He stirred and opened his eyes. Kotoha was right there, face close, staring down at him with wide eyes. He blinked. She asked, softer than usual, if she'd woken him. The bed was now surrounded by stuffed animals, a whole pile of them brought in from her room. He stared. She explained that whenever she had a fever or couldn't sleep as a kid, her mom would fill the bed with plushies just like this. She arranged them around him and asked if it felt a little less lonely now. He muttered that he wasn't a kid, but his voice had no real edge to it. He just felt kind of lonely, that was all. Kotoha didn't make a big deal out of it. She just said that adults got lonely sometimes too, and pressed something onto his head. It was a sticker, the kind you'd put on a notebook that somehow made you feel a tiny bit better for no real reason. He scratched his head and admitted he didn't really get what she meant, but accepted the exception she was making. Just for today. Kotoha smiled, easy and a little smug. She said it was because he was always so good to her, so today she'd be the one doing the spoiling. He flopped back and exhaled. Kotoha announced she was going to make rice porridge and headed out. He said nothing. Then a crash came from the kitchen. He went stiff. Then another sound, and a loud exclamation. He lay there listening, quietly thinking this was kind of worrying. The sound of steady chopping reached him from down the hall. Kotoha was focused, working in the kitchen. A little while later she burst back through the door, out of breath, holding a bowl of rice porridge. She called out that it was ready. Then she stopped. He was completely out. Buried in stuffed animals, mask still on, holding one of the plushies against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Kotoha looked at him and thought he was sleeping like he was in absolute paradise. After he recovered, Kotoha held out her hand. His rental period was over. She wanted the plushie back. He handed it over with a reluctant grip, expression flat. Peace of mind is the best medicine. Kotoha stared at the front door, completely thrown off. Two of her friends had just shown up unannounced. One of them announced their arrival like it was a big event. Kotoha was not feeling it. The landlord, Itsuki, appeared in the background and assumed it was a delivery. It was not friend attack. Itsuki smiled and asked if they were Kotoha's friends. The two girls took one look at him and immediately lost it. One of them loudly called him hot, the other agreed just as loudly. Kotoha told them to keep it down. They were seated inside with tea. Anoka, the more excitable one, leaned forward and started firing questions at Itsuki. Whether he had a girlfriend, if he dated anyone, what his type was. Kotoha's other friend pulled her aside and whispered that Anoka already had a boyfriend. Anoka whispered back that she was asking for Kotoha's sake. Kotoha grabbed her before she could cause more damage. Anoka was already running full speed. She declared Itsuki a high-spec guy, pointed out he was good-looking and good at housework, and told Kotoha this was a green light situation. Itsuki just quietly asked them to stop. Kotoha's other friend, Go, admitted she usually went for guys with stronger features, so she wasn't sure he was her type. Anoka grabbed Go and dragged her off, insisting she couldn't let this chance slip away. Go turned on Itsuki with the energy of a job interviewer, asking about his work history, what the word responsibility meant to him, whether he'd had part-time experience. Anoka joined in, demanding to know what had drawn him to the landlord position. Kotoha was exasperated. She told them both they were doing this for her sake, whether they wanted to admit it or not, and pushed them toward her room. Forcibly escorted upstairs, they ended up in Kotoha's room, surrounded by her stuffed animals. Anoka looked around and demanded to know what was actually going on with the landlord. Kotoha played dumb. Anoka said it was obviously about the landlord, wasn't it obvious? Anoka, in full detective mode, pointed out that living this close to someone of the opposite sex with nothing going on was basically impossible. Kotoha said nothing was going on. Anoka called her a liar. Images of the landlord drifted through Kotoha's head. Small moments, quiet ones. She looked away and insisted again. Nothing. Go told Kotoha she was just saying everything was fine because she felt pressured to. Then Anoka pushed further, suggesting in the most dramatic way possible that the landlord had definitely at least stolen something of Kotoha's at some point. Kotoha shot that down completely. She did her own laundry. Itsuki wasn't like that. She said it quietly, more to herself than to them. Anoka suddenly remembered she'd left her phone downstairs and bolted. Go called after her not to fall down the stairs. The other friend smiled, relaxed, and watched her go. Downstairs, the clock on the wall read just past 2. Back in the room, Go noticed Anoka had been gone a while. Kotoha agreed. Go said she'd go check on her. Kotoha said she wasn't worried or anything, but stood up anyway and crept toward the door. Kotoha peeked through the door. Anoka was down in the kitchen with Itsuki, the two of them talking easily while he worked. Kotoha couldn't make out a single word from where she was. They looked like they were having a good time. Itsuki laughed at something Anoka said. From across the room, it looked easy and natural between them. Kotoha watched from the doorway. She thought, without much direction, about what she'd been expecting. She reminded herself that this was Itsuki's workplace. Of course, he treated everyone the same. She thought about the coffee shop where he worked, the little note written on her cup, the warmth of it, and told herself that didn't mean anything special. He was just a nice person to a random customer who happened to be there. And yet she'd let herself think maybe she was different. Kotoha sat curled up just outside the door, exhaling slowly. She thought it was pretty pathetic. A little later, the friends headed out. Itsuki offered to walk them to the station. Anoka thanked him cheerfully on the way out. They walked down the street, Anoka naming the area with the bright energy of someone who'd already made herself at home. Itsuki noticed she'd said Hatarubi, the name of the street. Kotoha walked beside him, quiet. She knew there was no point in getting worked up. She still was. She thought maybe she should just forget it. Then she turned and asked, flat, what he and Anoka had been talking about. He asked what was wrong with her. She said nothing. Kotoha accused him of being a smooth talker. Itsuki just said She told herself it was pointless to expect anything from him and let it go. Then Itsuki told her they'd been talking about her. She stopped. Anoka had told him that Kotoha was guarded at first but warmed up fast once she opened up. Basically like a cat. She'd encouraged him not to give up. Itsuki thought back to the first day he became landlord, when Kotoha had called him a pervert and a creep on sight. He considered this. Anoka had also admitted she had no idea what high school girls were into and offered to fill him in. Itsuki took her up on it. He mentioned, genuinely, that he couldn't always tell if Kotoha was actually enjoying herself. Kotoha processed this. So they'd been talking about her. Anoka had described the face Kotoha made when she was happy, the way the corners of her mouth turned up in a little grin. She demonstrated it with her fingers. Kotoha smiled without meaning to, eyes closed. So they were talking about her, huh? Itsuki let out a small laugh. Kotoha reacted immediately, flustered and demanding to know what was funny. He said she was easy to read. Kotoha panicked and told him to just say whatever it was. He didn't. Anoka came running back toward them, calling out to Kotoha. The three of them stood there together on the street as the afternoon wound down. Anoka leaned in close and whispered the key piece of intel directly into Kotoha's ear. The landlord didn't have a girlfriend. Kotoha's eyes went wide. Anoka pulled back with a satisfied look and told her that was good news. Kotoha covered her face at the station. Anoka bowed to Itsuki and asked him to keep looking after Kotoha. Itsuki said the pleasure was his. Kotoha internally screamed that she did not need that information delivered like that. Is it fine as long as its friend approved?